All right, good morning. Thank you. So let's move right on. So in the spirit of trying to, as Marilyn was telling us, we're going to focus on addressing the gaps. So I wanted to say a little bit about what we're doing so you know that that's maybe not a gap or how you can help us with that and give you a little sense of the challenges we see. And I really like that we're taking our inspiration from Henry Ford, because I think we are looking at a little bit of the science of industrialization of collecting patient input. So it's both flexible, we tailor it to that population, but at the same time we're standardizing it, so we're not reinventing wheels here, and we're making it something that's affordable for every disease area. And all sponsors, including the many small companies that are among the most innovative, drug developers, for example, and we don't want to price them out of being able to collect this kind of information for the sake of the patients that they're trying to serve. So just real quickly, this was a case study thing, so I had to put in some kind of case study. So I was invited to a meeting that the Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy held in March. And so I was a listener at that meeting. I was very happy to be invited. And I just want to give you a little sense of the kind of thing we hear in all of our meetings, but this was an externally led one. So they had a few panels. Here's a sampling of what the patients who were, the boys who were aged 3 to 10 years, and their parents saying what was most important for them in terms of trying to feel better, do better. The couple of the themes here were more energy, stronger heart, stronger bones. The corticosteroids that these little boys are already taking to treat the inflammation are resulting in fragile bones and bone loss even at that early age when they're still developing. So for them, the desired functions were regain the ability to ride a bike, retain the ability to climb stairs, walk. One parent's goal was that his son could evacuate the school in the event of a fire. In terms of clinical trial availability, getting to the site, there were a lot of trials available to that age group. They're still mobile. But there was the loss of time and the impact on their siblings, who also kind of lost their childhood because they had to come along with mom and their brother for him to be in trials. So, and if you had one son who was sicker than the other, there was one example where one son was eligible for the trial, the other was not. And so you can imagine the difficulties there. Another panel, the tween teen years, as they called it. This is boys ages 12 to 15 and their parents. What was most important? Again, more energy, stronger heart, stronger bones. Here, the upper body loss strength was noticeable and was happening more rapidly. Things like where the infusion site is and pill size tolerability became a big issue for these boys. And what did they want? What were their functions? They wanted to feed themselves. They wanted to stand up, toilet themselves. So those were their goals. And these boys generally were non-ambulatory, so there were many fewer trials for them because the eligibility criteria in many cases was a 6-minute walk. So, and the parents have to take off, the few trials that are in the country, the parents have to take off work and risk their job status, you know, losing their job to take the child to trial. So that's an example of the kind of things that we hear, and I'll tell you that we hear different kinds of extremely powerful, compelling, and insight-providing information from patients for every one of these diseases we've done over the last 5 years. Different every time, but every disease area has its needs and compelling case, and what can we do about this? And so one of the things we realized is that a lot of the development programs, we're not incorporating, we're not asking patients early enough to even capture some of these things, not maybe even realizing that there were so many who wanted to participate in trials and couldn't you come up with another eligibility criteria. The insights you could get from that early discussion were really important. So one of our themes and messages starting not long after we started hearing this is, please go early. Start talking to patients in an open-ended way early to see what matters most to them. Find out all the things that they're experiencing, so what matters most. And then as you move along the development sort of pathway here, as they move into trials, well, what are the aspects of trials that mattered most or create the most barriers to patients? What would make it easier for them to participate? What endpoints are most meaningful to them? So work on endpoint development, then take that into trials, see if patients can actually participate in trials, and then have that information ideally collected in trials to be submitted with an application. So again, I'm very focused on FDA decision-making here, but so we have that at the time of decision-making. And here's again where the patient preference information and benefit-risk trade-off studies can be informing what are patients willing to tolerate, or what risks can they take? So that kind of information collected at disease level, and CDRH, our colleagues at CDRH are further along and more spending a lot of effort in developing a lot of good tools in that area. So, but that would help us inform our benefit risk assessment and decision making. And then subsequently, how can you keep track and keep communicating to patients what you learn that's new? Tell them what they wanted to know about that drug, but making a decision about whether they want to take it. And how can we keep track on whether the trial results are holding out in the indicated population? So what's FDA doing? Well, we're trying to do a lot of things, but here's what I hope are the plain language versions. I could have given you much longer statutory versions of what they were being told to do, but I only have 7 minutes. So here we go. When we had all these meetings with patients, one of the things people started saying to us in these meetings were, well, this was a great meeting, but what are you going to do now, FDA? I mean, are you going to do something with this? Are you going to change a decision about, is this going to, people also have different ideas about how drugs are developed, and some patients weren't sure of what we could do at that point. And so we thought, well, what we at least can do is try to clarify the pathway for how to go from this very powerful qualitative information to a set of endpoints that could be used in a trial. So here's the 4 that we're working on. The first we expect out next June, this coming June, I should say, collecting comprehensive input to make sure it's representative of the population, methods for that. The next one, we're working on this already, developing a holistic set of impacts, burden of disease and treatment. We heard about both in our meetings that matter the most to patients. And then how do you turn that into measures, including measures that actually could be affected by technology and improved? And finally, what would you do to bring that into endpoints and technologies you might use to collect this information? We see these 4 guidances supporting the entire development pathway, I'll just say that. And now I want to get into some questions that if we could figure out how to, good approaches to these subpopulation questions, it would be very helpful for decision makers, and probably not just FDA. And that goes to when you look at impacts, what matters most? Well, how does that vary by demographic subpopulations, pediatric, age groups within pediatric, geriatric, stage of disease progression, comorbidities that they may have, cultural differences, and so on. So there's a series of questions here. I won't go through all of them because the red light's blinking. But they're all about, these are really incredibly important questions, but we know they vary a lot in terms of the subpopulation. So can we try to do a good job of good approaches that are not reinvented every time to get at these questions that matter a whole lot to people within the disease area? And they're the same questions across diseases, but they're going to really vary within the progression of that disease and so on. So that's it, and thank you.
Wow, that was impressive. Theresa, thank you so much. That was a whirlwind. You did that amazingly well. Thank you. Question for in the back.
Gerbaugh from Santa Fe. Hi, Theresa. It's a great talk. These are terrific.
Is that on? I hear it's a little hard.
You can't hear it? Okay. I'll get closer.
Better, thank you.
Okay. These are great questions. One of the questions that I have for you that isn't mentioned here is, as we answer these questions, how will FDA evaluate data quality?
How will we do what?
How are you thinking about how you're going to evaluate data quality? Because we could answer these questions and then you'll come back or we'll question the quality of the data. So are you thinking about that simultaneously?
Absolutely. I think that that's really what we think that the 4 guidances will be helpful with. For example, giving people a very clear idea, so not leaving it to the imagination, what kind of methods we think should be used and what are good approaches. And we're really providing these and to cover a wide range. As I showed in that chevron chart where the guidances support all along the way, Lana, I think we really see that these are utilities, if you will. They're going to cover a wide range of approaches to try to show that you've tried to be representative. You've not asked the questions in a way to be misleading or to, create a certain kind of response. We have concerns about that kind of thing. And so we think that will help and increase our confidence in the data as well.
Great. We have a question from Pamela and then from John, and then we'll probably have to move on. Pamela?
Yes, my question is sort of general, and it's just because all these presentations are really awesome. I was wondering if we can get the slide presentations afterwards instead of taking pictures.
I will defer to Morgan from the academies.
Yes, the slides will be made available on the meeting website after the meeting.
Well, it was so much fun watching you all take out your smartphones. Now I won't have that entertainment anymore. John, question.
John Wagner, Takeda. Theresa, that was fantastic. One of the things I was thinking as I was toggling through your questions is what's the FDA's attitude towards underserved populations and the context around that? And going back to Lauren's presentation, Michael J. Fox is all over Parkinson's. It's well served. But what about all the areas where there isn't really strong patient advocacy or pharmaceutical biotechnology companies interested in that disease?
Well, exactly. Okay, so that's why I'm coining a new phrase, and I hope that some people might just kind of tense up when you say industrialization because that term has bad connotations. I grew up in North Jersey, full of factories. It's a feeling of home for me. But but the idea here is that. Yeah, we got to make this like the Model T. Okay, we've got to make it so that it can get everywhere. We can use these methods. So we are concerned about that. We're hoping, and in later discussion, Laura Lee may have thoughts to add here. But we're trying to put a body of tools out there that really give people lots of ways to try to go at it. We don't want people to just go to a focus group in a nearby pleasant suburb near corporate HQ. We do really want to get in, and in many cases, these cultural issues are, multi-regional is also a concern here because people run trials around the world. So some of the things that matter and sound like the most important in the U.S. may not matter elsewhere. We've had meetings where we had the people who could afford and could come to White Oak. The first meeting, we learned a lot from that. We learned that we have to go to extra trouble and work hard to try to make people from other environments feel comfortable coming to FDA or being on the webcast. If they don't have access to a webcast, we had a meeting where I think it just shows how far we've come in April on opioid use disorder. And imagine coming to a federal facility if you're an active user and maybe you're not using prescription opioids. And, but we succeeded in getting, we had about 100 people in the room with OUD. And we got buses. We got the help from patient advocacy groups who, work with opioids. So I think we have to work harder, but you can't not go there. And we're trying to figure out how to have ideally publicly available and not expensive to license in use of tools. We're trying to figure out how to have, ideally, open source kind of tools that are good tools that can be used. I mean, we would like to, over time, have approaches and tools that make this possible for every disease area, including ones that don't have, as you say, well-resourced advocacy groups. And for small companies that really they're going from one venture capital infusion to the next, and they can't afford the uncertainty of how to add this to their program, and we don't want that to be a reason not to do it. So, that's our aspiration. I'm not saying we have the answers yet, but that's where we're going.
So that's excellent. I can sense from the room we could have this discussion and turn this into the moderated session right now, but we're not going to do that. We'll have a 45-minute moderated session later where I'm sure many of these issues will get worked even more. Thank you, Theresa, so much.